is meant to make you uncomfortable, sure, but should it test every limit imaginable to shatter the viewer's psyche? These films seem to think so. I'm Tilly from What Culture Horror, and these are 10 extreme horror films that try to break their audience. Number 10. Exhibit A. We'll start this off with a not-so-wholesome family film. This found-footage flick tracks the journey of a father who, due to his inability to reconcile with his own failings, puts his family through a nightmare they may never be able to escape. Exhibit A takes full advantage of the found-footage subgenre. The movie is personal, with the violence, both physical and emotional, coming across as painfully intimate. Everything that happens in the story could have been avoided if, even just once, this man took a second to self-reflect, rather than wallow in self-pity, but he never does, and those he loves must pay dearly for it. Take the moments where he verbally lashes out at his family. His explosion of anger turns him from a loving father into a rage monster devoid of any humanity. His character switch in these moments is naturalistic, allowing you to get a small sense of what it's like to be a fly on the wall of a violently dysfunctional household. The most messed up thing about Exhibit A is that the way it treats domestic violence is genuine. This doesn't feel like a made-up series of events, but rather a recording of a real-life incident. Number 9. Terrifier. It's always bloody clowns, isn't it? Two friends on Halloween night are stalked by a demented man in a clown costume. If they want to survive, they'll have to run, hide, and fight like their lives depend on it, which they do. There is a scene in Terrifier where villain Art the Clown bisects a woman with a handsaw, and it is agonising to watch. The worst part about it though is not necessarily the violence on screen, but that the movie treats it and all of its gruesome displays of violence against women in particular as cute. Its scenes of death and torture are handled in such a way that it's as if the movie is winking at the viewer. This clashing of horrifying visuals and childlike tone gives the whole film an old school grindhouse texture to it. But not in the way that feels like a throwback. It's more like it uses its style as a way to challenge the audience to turn it off, but also to egg them on like a bully. You will not come out of watching Terrifier feeling good. In fact, you'll probably want to give yourself a time out to think about what you've done by getting to the credits. Number 8. The Poughkeepsie Tapes. These are not the home movies you are looking for. After the police raid a house in New York, they find hundreds of videotapes made by a serial killer. As the investigation proceeds into finding the identity and whereabouts of the killer, the viewer is subjected to his record of murderous mayhem. Simply calling the Poughkeepsie Tapes disturbing doesn't come close to cutting it. It's the kind of movie you watch on a dare rather than seek out on your own. It is structured and edited in a way as to make it seem like each tape could be from a legitimate documentary. The tapes themselves are not only nauseating to watch, but almost hypnotic because of how uncanny they appear. You'll want to rip your eyes off the screen, but you will find yourself unable to out of sheer curiosity. It's as close to a snuff film as you can get without actually being one, forcing your eyes to treat it like a car wreck on the side of the road. It also makes for a fun drinking game with friends. Take a shot whenever someone says, "Why are we watching this again?" Number 7. Climax. Gaspar Noé's art house horror flick Climax is like Dante's descent into the Inferno, only without a Virgil to guide you safely through it. This is coming from the same bloke who gave us 2002's Nightmare Irreversible, however. What do you expect? Doubling as a psychological horror film and the most effective anti-drug PSA in the past 10 years, Climax follows the cast of a dance troupe who, during their after-party in an abandoned building, find that their punch bowl has been spiked with LSD. As the night goes on and both cabin fever and the drugs set in, the troupe sink further into the deepest depths of human degeneracy. To get this out of the way first, if you have anxiety of any kind, please stay away from this movie. The gradual build-up of tension is meticulous in how it aims to unnerve and build a sense of revulsion that leaks right through the screen. One of the scenes that stands out involves the beating of a pregnant woman whose screams of pain are realistic enough to activate your fight or flight response. Yikes. By the end, you'll want to find your nearest shock blanket and just wrap yourself up tight. Number 6. 3 Extremes. 3 Extremes is a movie where the title tells you everything you need to know about it. This 3-piece anthology horror film features 3 segments from 3 different well-known Asian horror directors. There isn't any central theme tying the 3 short films together. They exist only to be, well, extreme. Instead of trying to scare the viewer, the movie goes out of its way to unnerve and unsettle. Take the first segment, Dumplings, for example. To say what happens in it would ruin the surprise and get this video, probably taken down. But to give a taste, let's just say you'll never look at chopsticks, bathtubs, or even food again for that matter. It makes everything that comes after feel deserved. A huge accomplishment considering the 3rd segment is directed by Ichi the Killer and audition director Takashi Miike. You know it's going to be messed up when he's in charge. 3 Extremes needs to be experienced to be understood, and even then the only thing you'll understand is that you need professional help after watching it. This movie does not f*** around. Number 5. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Depravity has never felt so depraved. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer follows the day-to-day life of nomadic serial killer Henry. He is joined by his prison pal Otis and Otis's sister Becky. Plot-wise, think of the movie kind of like Dazed and Confused, only with serial killers instead of hippies and far less pleasant to watch. When watching Henry, you can almost understand why, despite being filmed in 1985, it wasn't released until 1990. The movie is completely unfiltered, giving it a raw sense of realism that makes it feel like you're there along with the characters as accomplices in their cruel crimes. A huge aspect of what makes it so effective is that the world in which the movie takes place in is our own. Serial killer narratives have a habit of trying to spice things up, adding style and substance to give them an extra kick. Henry is not like this. There is nothing movie-like about it. It is an unflinching, unapologetic look at what it truly means to be a monster. The movie acts as a reminder that evil like this can exist anywhere and can be enacted upon anyone. No one is safe from the boogeyman. Number 4. Be My Cat, a film for Anne. Run for the f***ing hills, Anne Hathaway. In Be My Cat, a film for Anne, an amateur Romanian filmmaker, inspired by Anne Hathaway's performance as Catwoman in The Dark Knight Rises, decides to make a film for her in hopes of winning the actress's affection. Be My Cat is a movie that is so uncomfortable it becomes unbearable. The interactions between the filmmaker and everyone else are cringeworthy to the point where it feels like you're listening to nails on a chalkboard every time he speaks. Moments of torture and murder, of which there are several, become even more sickening than they normally would because of his childlike demeanour. Even while committing immensely heinous crimes of violence, he does not see what he is doing as wrong, treating those he is harming as nothing more than toys for his own enjoyment. According to the film's trivia section on IMDb, after watching some of the footage, an executive producer went out of their way to check in on one of the actresses to make sure she was okay because her abduction scene was so realistic. When said scene hits, you'll find yourself unable to blame the guy. Number 3. Tokyo Gore Police. This one requires an apology in advance before being talked about. In a dystopian Japan, life forms known as engineers, whose bodies are infected by a virus that turns them into biomechanical monsters, have begun terrorizing the city. Ruka, a member of the engineer hunters, is tasked with bringing an end to the chaos. Japanese cinema is no stranger to insanity. However, this particular movie amps the weirdness up to a level that breaks the goddamn scale. You will see some sights in Tokyo Gore Police that will simultaneously both boggle your mind and have your brain malfunction in trying to process even just a fraction of the visuals. Underneath all the guts and gore is a smart movie about the dangers of authoritarianism, though getting to that message involves falling down a rabbit hole of more nightmare fuel than you can shake a stick at. Take the scene in the sex club, for example, where a man gets his penis cut off and it's replaced by a literal cannon. It might sound funny, but it is far from comical. Okay, maybe it's a little funny. The woman who has knives for limbs, however, is not. This is movie magic at its most grotesque. Number 2. The Treatment. This Belgian crime flick makes Seven feel like a Pixar movie in comparison. A traumatised detective must track down a vicious child predator before they claim their next victim. In the process, he comes to unravel the mystery of what happened to his younger brother, who was taken by a paedophile when they were children. The subject matter in The Treatment is stomach-churning to say the least. It may be classified as a crime film, but it is 100% a horror movie. Crimes against children, especially those of a sexual nature, can make one lose faith in the human race. This movie knows this and refuses to sugarcoat anything, delivering a movie about abuse that is always difficult to watch. You will struggle to finish it, as at every single turn it makes sure to never give you 1 second to breathe. One horrible thing happens after another, almost as if it's trying to one-up itself. However, it does not revel in its darkness, rather it shows us things for how they are, and is all the more soul-crushing for it. Number 1. Angst. If you've ever wondered how a movie can make a man eating a sausage a worse sight than necrophilia, this is the film for you. In Angst, immediately after being released from a prison stint, a young man decides to double down on his criminal behaviour by engaging in a deadly home invasion. At its core as a movie, Angst seems to have a deep contempt for the very concept of basic human decency. This is an ugly, vile, filthy little film that at every moment is filled with a violent resentment for anyone and anything remotely respectable. Much like its twisted protagonist, Angst is out for blood. The performance of the man behind the murderer is real, whereas in Portrait of a Serial Killer there may be some, albeit small, senses of humanity under Henry, there is none with the killer here. You're rarely ever not with him, creating a bond between audience and character that lets you understand his sick, twisted fantasies. Think of it like Inception, but instead of going into the mind of Ken Watanabe, you're inside the one of somebody like John Wayne Gacy. Then there's the sausage-eating scenes, which are best left untalked about. Thanks for this one, Austria. Thanks a fucking bunch. And that's our list. What extreme horror movie broke you? Let us know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe and swing on by our channel again if you want to catch more creepy content. I've been Tilly and this has been What Culture. Thank you so much for watching, and I know this list was a heavy one, so please make sure to look after yourselves, and if you don't feel like watching these movies, there's absolutely no shame in it. Make sure to put your mental health first, especially during times like this. Until next time.